Hi, I'm Victoria Regan, and I am at the First Coast Classic Championship. And this particular interview is what I would call up close and personal because it's a very wonderful longtime friend of mine, Gary Pearce. And I'm excited to have an opportunity to talk to Gary. I haven't seen him for a while, and to ask him all kinds of great questions.
Great.
That's it. So, Gary, I've known you for a long time and we have a history, but take me back to your beginnings because a lot of us may not know where it all started for you, that is, in dance.
Well, I danced a little bit in high school doing musical theater. And then went to college and I dropped out and I got into the ballroom business at the Fred Astaire Dance School that was in Memphis. And from there I traveled a little bit and my interest in it developed and I started competing like everyone does because at the time that was about the only outlet for it. And from there just kind of went from one thing to the other as I went through it.
So, did you find what became your, well, I know what your gifts are, but let's say you competed. Is that something that you wanted to do, or did you discover another aspect of our business that you loved?
Well, the thing that was always interesting about it, I always loved Fred Astaire, and I always loved Gene Kelly, and I loved the movie musicals, and I particularly liked the partnering of everything. And when you do ballroom dance, especially standard and Latin like I did, that's what you really learn how to do is real partnering. But then I started working with some other people that really opened my eyes. An Englishman named John Delroy, and I was trained by Peter Maxwell. And so these people really turned me on to the things that you could do with it. And no one had really been doing much with it before. And I remember going to England and the first time to study for about 3 or 4 months and working with these incredible people that were showing me things and giving me a license to do artistic things with it, which is what I always felt like was right for me. And so after a pretty successful career competing, I kind of chucked it all and started performing with you and I and Peter Maxwell and company, Jacob's Pillow and Pierre Dulaine, and then springboarding that to other different outlets of my own choreography. And it just kind of took off from there, and I've been very happy since then. I miss the competing, of course, because that's interesting. That's a different kind of rush. But creating is a different rush also. And you know what that's like. And when you see your work out there and people do it and they do it well, it's like it's a great rush. So I'm very happy with the directions that has taken me. I've got a chance to work with great choreographers in show business, like you know. I mean, Jeffrey Holder and Marge Champion and Peter Anastos and
These are the greats, by the way. I mean,
like
from
Graziella Daniela
Exactly.
and these incredible people that just really loved ballroom dancing. The one thing that was really turned me on to the whole thing back when I really started getting into the creative side of it was that how much respect Broadway choreographers and ballet choreographers had for the work that we do. And for a while, you know, you think you're like a stepchild. Well, okay, I'm a dancer, but I'm a ballroom dancer. But they said, oh my goodness, what you do is so wonderful. And that really legitimized it for me in a lot of different ways. I mean, I was going to do what I was going to do regardless, but I was really glad to see that they thought that it was so exciting for them to have an opportunity to work with people like us.
Well, it's like the Twyla Tharps of the world. I think they all have choreographed so many partnering things, like with Baryshnikov, and they never came to us initially for help. So it was nice that they found you, and they came to you for the partnering aspects and to help them.
It's great. It's great fun. And then by the time you learn something from them and they learn something from you, what you end up with is always interesting. And it's not just same thing over and over again. It's always musical and very theatrical, and that's kind of the direction that I've kind of been going in for a long time now.
Well, and if when I look at you, I can't help but laugh. Sorry, but it's because we have had a lot of fun in all these
yeah.
serious pieces of work we've done. We did Jacob's Pillow together, which was Peter Maxwell's, the first ballroom company before Pierre's that you were a big part of. We just had such a great time because, as you said, the competitions can be somewhat restrictive, and when you're doing a show on stage, as we know, it's so much more free. You can do whatever you like, and you use your acting skills as well.
Yeah, and the acting skills, the best acting teacher I think I ever had was John Delroy, because he was a dancer that had trained in everything, but he really understood the breathing and the theatrical aspect of really what the emotion should be in something, rather than just something that was pretend. Like any good actor, they don't appear to pretend. You kind of get caught up in it. And if you can get caught up in the dancing that way, so that all of a sudden you're not put off by something that's like changing so radically from what the story you started telling, then you've created something, that's interesting to look at.
And all the theater dancers, including American Ballet Theater, they all work really from the inside out. Every movement they make, you've got Fosse and all these people, every movement they make has an intention and a motivation behind it.
Yeah, and it's not just adding on. There was a critic from the New York Times named Jennifer Dunning for a long, long time, and she loved ballroom dancing, and she loved it, but no matter who was attempting it. She loved Twyla's piece, the Sinatra piece.
Yeah,
she loved the concept of ballroom dancing, but she criticized competitive ballroom dancing because to her, these talented dancers, and these people are extraordinarily talented that do competitive dancing, but they would add on things like a jazz step or a balletic step without really understanding what to do with it, and it just looked like it was just pasted on. And she didn't have much time for that kind of style, but she really loved the pure ballroom, and she loved standard, and she loved theatricalized stuff like American Ballroom Theater and what Peter Maxwell was doing. So.
And you're also involved, not only do you have two beautiful children, one of them Grace, which is with American Ballet Company, right, already?
American Ballet Theater, she's in the studio company, yeah.
And she's how old? Grace is how old?
She'll be 18 in June.
Gorgeous, gorgeous girl. Hopefully we can show some shots of her, but you also work with the ballet company, don't you?
I've choreographed for several ballet companies. They like the ideas of what we do. There's a company in Cleveland called Verb Ballets, and I did a piece for them which was all Gershwin music. And I've taught ballroom classes at American Ballet Theater. And through the years, I've worked with a lot of different kinds of contemporary ballet companies, a lot of the Alvin Ailey dancers. So there's always something interesting to do with people that are interested in what you do.
So you'd say then you've developed in your creative accomplishments and desires really the desire to choreograph for companies and still for couples as well?
Oh, sure. The thing is, all you really want, you want someone in the studio with you, a couple, a group of people who are just going to let you do what you do, and they're not going to try to change it. I once had a couple, I'm not going to mention any names, but they were a former United States champion in a certain style. And they said, Gary, we really want you to choreograph something for us. We love your work. I said, yeah, sure, that will be great. So we finally got together, and after about 20 minutes, they were saying, oh, this is like wonderful, but let me ask you, would you mind if we changed something? I said, very much. I said, if you want me to change it, or if there's something not right, please speak to me. I'll be glad to talk about it. But no, if that's the way you work, then I'm not interested in working with you. If you want me to do something, this is what it is. Don't change it. And I've been lucky that a lot of the couples I've worked with, they understand that going in, and they've let me just do what I do, and they take it somewhere else, which is what they're supposed to do anyway.
Well, that's right. If you go to a choreographer or teacher, you want to show them the respect. I mean, I think that's a great thing you've been able to do that. I don't think a lot of choreographers or teachers may say that. I think if you take theater choreographers, the Jerome Robbins, all the great choreographers, nobody changes their work unless they change it.
I mean, we have an idea of what we want, and when you put in an idea, That's not my idea. Uh, and that's not to say that there's something wrong. I could make mistakes and frequently have with choreography, but I can recognize it after a bit. I mean, you can see if it's not working. Uh, but being criticized by a critic never bothered me. But someone changing the choreography, that's where I draw the line. I don't like that. And I will tell them. I will work with couples and I'll see them after, and you know this, after 6 months or so, and
You don't recognize any of the work.
yeah, and you don't recognize it. They remember one thing that you did, and that's in there, but the rest of it is completely different. I once did this beautiful piece for this extraordinarily talented couple. Extraordinarily talented couple. He was strong. He was balletic. He could do anything with his body. And the girl was a beautiful ballerina and could do things. And they had this music. The music was Samuel Barber's Adagio for Strings.
Oh.
And he came out carrying her, reading a book. And the game was, they were reading poetry together. And she was up here in like a fetal lift position. And he would read something, he would do a turn, and she would reach down and she would grab the page and tear it out, and she would hold up and read it. And there was a huge controversy and that was the beginning of the piece, because some of the judges thought that they were tearing out pages of the Bible.
Oh.
And I'm
Might not have gone over too well if they thought
like,
that.
first of all, how did it get to be a Bible? It's clearly a romantic duet. So when they
Ignorance on our part, of
and
course.
and bless their hearts, they were great people, but they changed the work. And I saw them later and I said, look, what you had before was much better. I'm sorry. And of course, they weren't getting marked for the new way they did it because they had nothing behind it. So, but that's something we all have to deal with from time to time.
So couples, you're forewarned if you want Gary Pierce to do a number, which you should, by the way, because your work is great. I'm a great admirer of your pieces. And I loved all the Gershwin pieces you always did, and the Fred and Ginger pieces.
Yeah. I mean, the music, American music, is like to die for. Blues and Gershwin and these guys. And the big problem with a lot of competitive stuff that you see, the musicality kind of goes out the window with it, because there's such an emphasis on being strong and big and fast and fast and fast and fast. So there's no contrasting movement, no contrasting ideas, and that's a shame because it's so rich. It's, when you have different things, it's just such a rich new way of dancing rather than just hitting it the same way all the time.
Called nuance or dynamics. Yes,
That's
right.
right.
We actually have those.
Or lack of nuance, lack of dynamics.
So, what haven't you done that you'd still like to do, Gary? We all have dreams, but sometimes we don't really want to admit to them. We think it's too late, which it's never too late. But anything that you'd really love, or someone you'd love to work with?
I had a chance to work with some great people from the Alvin Ailey Company, Desmond Richardson, dancers from American Ballet Theater, and these people were like so good, willing to do anything, and just anybody like that. I love to see well-trained dancers of any kind, and I like for them. My biggest regret, especially in our business, is that they don't reach far enough into the artistic side of what they're trying to do. And so, like, if you see a show by one of the champions, what they come up with as far as a show is so, how can I say this? It's awful. It's really awful. It takes
Might be lacking in creativity or artistry.
lacking in continuity, but they have ideas, which is good. Which are the ideas that every dancer has. I certainly give people, credit for new ideas. I can't even talk. Good ideas, no matter how outlandish they are, if they come from a place that's correct and they build around it, it's good. But what they do, you'll take a beautiful piece of music. A couple will come out in the beginning of a show dance or a theatrical or even any kind of a show, and what they'll do is they'll take an idea, and an emotional idea, for the first 6 or 8 or 10 bars, leave it completely, and come back to it at the very end. And we're supposed to stay with the idea. It's like starting a beautiful book and reading the first chapter, and you're right
Certainly
there.
not ripping out the
And
pages.
yeah, and then the next thing you know, it's a different book. And then you don't know where to look. But an idea, we know the characteristics of these dances. So a waltz does this, tango does this, a rumba does this. But when you see a lot of the shows, it's like it starts like this, but next thing you know, it's something else. So I don't think they understand how important continuity is.
And sometimes they don't know that people like yourself are out there, that it would take really very little time in your framework to put things together. And I just wonder if sometimes they're rationalized that it could be the time factor. They don't know who to go to, and you would be a great, well, there's quite a few. There's about 3 or 4 really in the country that put together great shows. So that's also good information for people to know. We all know that couples need terrific shows and that they need somebody like you to put it together.
Yeah, I think that everyone can, they just have to be smarter about what they're doing. When you're doing a show, you're out there by yourself. You don't have other couples flying around. You are naked to the world. Everything that you do, we're going to see. And it should make sense, rather than just being out there and a little bit of it working and something else. And the shows these days, they take a half hour. They do a show, they do a dance, there's a costume change. There may be a recording of someone's youth, and then it goes back to something else. So there's no momentum built for a show. Rather than having a great dramatic climax to a show, it kind of goes up, and it goes down, and it goes back up, and it goes back down. I mean, for 5 dances, I mean that's a lot of up and down. And instead of just having a way to do it so you can build something out of it.
Well, it's again, as you've done, as you've looked so much outside our field, you've experienced theater and all forms of dance. So it's kind of in your blood. And again, it's been great talking to you. We never get a chance to see each other, maybe once or twice a year.
We'll have to have
It's
this
always
often.
fun. Yeah, we'll do this more. We'll have part 2 of Gary Pierce. And thanks, Gary.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.